Welcome to Community Church Unitarian Universalist. I'm your worship associate, Jacqueline Luck, and it is a joy to be with you today. Community Church is a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Please look to your weekly email announcements, Community Matters, to be updated on what's going on in our congregation. And we also have a few other announcements. Casey from First Church would like to speak with you. You know, I'm sorry, Casey, I forgot the land acknowledgement, and we can't forget that. But you might join me. It's on the back of our order of service. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of the indigenous trade route along the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as the Lodge. Tribes who lived on this land include the Caddo, the Natchez, Choctaw, Chitimacha, Pomona, the Tunica, the Lassie, and among others. We recognize that as a result of broken treaties and involuntary removals, Native Americans were often forced from their lands. We remember and pay respect to the communities impacted by these actions. Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an essential part of our local culture. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the indigenous nations that have lived and continue to thrive here. So we do. Casey.
Hello, my name is Casey Groves. I was a board member at First Church Uptown for 2 years, and I was a guest speaker here last summer. I'm teaching a class on Wednesday nights here in the fellowship hall at 6 p.m. It's an experiential class in the rites of Demeter and Persephone. And I want to invite you all to First Church tonight for a story circle event connecting Persephone's descent to the underworld and her rebirth in the spring to our own lives. It starts at 6 p.m. and if you haven't been there, it's at the corner of Claiborne and Jefferson Avenue. And there will be a reception afterwards where we'll be serving ancient Greek kykeon, alcoholic and non. Please speak to me afterwards if you'd like to attend or if you have any questions. Thank you.
Bill, you have an announcement you'd like to share with us?
Hello everyone, my name is Bill Fernandez. I'm on the Stewardship Committee. And Mary Ann was going to do this, but Al is home sick with COVID, so she thought it was safe to stay home. Anyway, some numbers for you. I don't know if she mentioned last week, but our goal for our pledge drive is $100,000. And as of this morning, we are at $60,600. If there's anyone here that needs a pledge card, there are some back in the atrium for you to fill out. And right now, I think we're off to a great start and keep up the good work. And now, Michelle will say what it means to be a Unitarian for her.
So I was asked to say a little bit about why I pledged this congregation. For me, being a member of this congregation is all about one thing: connection. connection to like-minded, progressive people who, like me, are searching for meaning, purpose, and relationships in life. Before coming to this church, I lived on the North Shore for about 25 years, and I belonged to the North Shore Unitarian congregation for most of that time. I developed some deep and lasting connections to people in that congregation. Near the end of those 25 years, Dale Firestone, the man I later married, was diagnosed with a rare and terminal brain disease. I stepped back from the church and other things in my life to spend quality time with Dale in his last years. In December 2019, we got married, and then 4 months later, on the day one of the COVID lockdown, we moved into our house in Metairie. Between COVID and Dale's illness, our lives became very small. It was hard not to be lonely during that time, even for an introvert like me who likes to spend time alone. Unfortunately, a little over a year after moving to the South Shore, Dale lost his battle, and I lost my soulmate. A few months later, I had gotten past the absolute worst of the grief. Things were resuming in person, and it was time for me to start becoming part of the world again. I was invited to a couple of things by Marilyn Malone, one of those lasting connections from North Shore congregation. First, I went to Dinners at 6, which, if you have not done Dinners at 6, I cannot say enough good things about it. You really should try it. It's a wonderful way to just be connected with people and share good conversation and fellowship, and good food, always. Then I started going to the Women's Book Club, and met some really wonderful women there, like-minded women who, like me, love books. I had known from the beginning that I wanted to start going back to a UU church, but I didn't want to make a commitment to get up every Sunday morning, and do not ask me to join a committee. But I signed the membership book anyway. But then something wonderful happened. I started developing connections here. I started hearing sermons that spoke to being a better person, and that spoke of our connections to each other and to the world at large. Dare I say, I started joining committees. First was the Social Justice Committee, which led to Together New Orleans, a group whose enthusiasm about the future of this city and state is absolutely contagious. Then I joined the choir. More recently, I joined the worship committee after taking a sermon writing class offered by Reverend Stacey. Thank you very much. And then I was elected to the board. And I take very seriously your trust in me and the rest of the board to do the business of this church. All of these wonderful things are made possible by our commitment together to this congregation. And of course, a large part of that commitment is pledging to financially support the programs and work of this church. Changes are coming to our little community, as they always do. In order to keep these wonderful connections going, we have to stay committed to this church and its growth, not just its sustenance. We need to grow. We have to give it our financial support. I know it will all work out. And I thank you all for your gifts, and especially the gifts of connection.
Thank you.
My opening words for you is a responsive reading that you can join me in. It's at the back of the hymnal. It's number 637. Today is a holy day. It is the day of Yom Kippur. And we have readings that honor all the traditions that we are part of and connect to in this world. And this reading was written by the late UU Reverend
Robert Eller Isaacs. So I'll begin, and then you respond with the italicized parts, which is, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. We forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other, and we begin again in love. For those many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other, and we begin again in love.
It's our custom to light a chalice invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship service. Please join us in singing the words of the chalice lighting. We light this flame that are in order of service. And now, order of service. Yes, what is it? She had an art thing she had to do today. I can't think of the word, construction, something she's doing. So I thought, she gave me something to read, but I just thought I would ad-lib here a little bit. And what I want to say is part of Reverend Stacey is going to talk about the eschatology of New Orleans, what it is, how we deal with death. And one of the main ways that we deal with death in New Orleans, of course, is a jazz funeral. And if you notice, I just watched a special on it, and they talk about as they're walking and escorting the family to the service, the music is very sad and slow. And then after the service, you all know what happens. They break out in celebration and joy for this life that has been, and celebrate it, and also this life that will stay with us and affect us and be, in a way, our companion through the years. And we hold that dear. And in a very serious, unplanned way, I think, but I realized when I was thinking about our music today, it's doing the same thing. It's very sad and solemn and quiet, and we'll close with when the saints come marching in. And so, in a way, we are repeating that same process of a jazz funeral. So, After that, I'm hoping that some of you children, if you're watching or listening, that might make some sense to you about our serious songs this morning, but serious and lovely. We will have our time that we choose to honor the joys and the sorrows of a congregation. Now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you're online, you may write your joy and sorrow in the comment section to be read aloud. In person, you may write them on one of the cards being passed out. Rebecca, could you get us some cards, if anybody would like one, by the greeters, or feel free to come up to the microphone and share your joy or sorrow. You can remain seated as we sing the hymn 264, the tomb, now the tomb is laid. Thank you, Reverend Stacey, for coordinating this for us. It was a wonderful occasion, and she had a vision to make reservations for us, 2 months in advance or something crazy like that, so we appreciate it. So our dear member of the choir and congregation, Jada, writes that she has been dealing with health issues again and misses being here. Does anyone else have an announcement they'd like to make? Karen?
This is a joy and a sorrow. I'm thankful that I got to meet and know Reverend Stacey, and I'm very sad that she'll be leaving us, and I wish her well. Thank you. I have a couple joy and sorrows. Similar to Carol, has been just unimaginable, I can't put it into words, joy being here with you all in New Orleans. in the service that I have tried to fulfill here with the church and all of you. And it's, I'm very sad about it too. I'll also share a joy. I'm experimenting bringing Copper in my dog with a non-official dog service. And he is just a joy every moment in my life. Yay!
I hate to bring sorrow, but a friend of mine named Imani, who was my first girlfriend here in New Orleans, was just killed by a car on her scooter. And this comes after somebody who's elected to the city council who run on the sole ticket of removing bike lanes. And there's been a ghost scooter put up where she was killed, and they caught the dude. But still, we need human infrastructure that doesn't just lead to people dying. And I have a second sorrow. I'm sorry to say that just you can look this up on your own. I won't go into it too much, but the salt water, there's such a drought that the salt water is now backing up into the river, which is affecting the drinking water for like the entire area, and there's a salt wedge or something that's like going over and spilling into where our drinking water is coming from. So it's already affecting communities below us. Just something to be conscious of. Water might not be safe to, take.
So I thought we should have some gifts for them, Stacey, and I wasn't the only one that thought that. One thing that I thought, and want y'all to write in it when we go to the fellowship hall, I started just kind of like yearbook annuals, you remember that? Let's just write a little something, or just write your name if you want in here for her to take and remember this congregation with. And the book is On Repentance and Repair, Making Amends in an Unapologetic World. It is the UUA read. In other words, congregations all over the country are agreeing to read this same book this year, so that they can have intercongregational conversations. And then I put a little communion wine in here to make your journey a little more blessed and sacred as you and your sister and Copper travel north. And may things go well. And have a beautiful ministry in Aniana, as I'm sure you will. And thank you for giving us the privilege to be your first congregation and the ability to ordain you. That was a special, loving time in this congregation, and we appreciate that. So we will light then a candle for those sorrows that remain quiet within your hearts. And we will light another candle for those joys which you have not shared at this moment, but maybe you will at fellowship time when we have coffee.
So now is Community Church Unitarian Universalist time for offering an offertory. Members and friends' generosity help us to do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online, and you can give by text, 504-370-2659, and text GIVE. And you can also, of course, give in person this morning. It's our custom to give 50% of our plate to a cause our congregation and its social justice ministry support. And for the month of September is for the Humane Society of New Orleans, and supporting all the good work that they do in supporting the human and animal connection of this world and bettering the lives of animals in our region. And this has been a month where we did our animal communion as well, and so we celebrate our loving pets and animal world, and we thank you for your generosity. And now we will sing hymn number 46. Now the day is over and you can remain seated. Yes, today is Yom Kippur, and it's a holy day. It's the beginning of the year, and this right after and coinciding with the autumnal equinox, and coming on the heels of Rosh Hashanah, the new year. And so I found this excerpt, I cut it significantly, so you can Google for a much fuller history if you want online. It's Jewish Eschatology from Encyclopedia Britannica. And so I'll just give you kind of some highlights of that going in for our next hymn. Ancient Israel's historical experience and faith in the guidance and the promise of God provide the foundation of the Western tradition of historical eschatology. The basic structure of this faith is found in the law of promise and fulfillment, and the eschatology of the Hebrew Bible is grounded in the faith in God and hope in the future. Jewish eschatology has its beginning in the biblical promise of Abraham that through him all nations would be blessed, and that his descendants would receive a good and broad land, and a land flowing with milk and honey. Prophetic hopes kept the idea of Israel alive after the destruction of the kingdoms in Israel, the 8th century BCE, and Judah in the 6th century BCE. The book of Daniel contains the first use of symbolic language of the mysteriously precise numbers that formed the core of subsequent apocalyptic speculation in both Judaism and Christianity. His apocalyptic hope anticipated the kingdom of the Son of Man following the consummation of evil in the fourth and final kingdom of the world. Daniel offers the first expression of hope in a Messiah and in a Son of Man, an eschatology that unites the fulfillment of history of Israel with the end of world history. Daniel's vision of the four empires also reveals the hostility of Jewish and early Christian apocalyptic thought to imperial power. From 200 BCE to 639 CE, at the end of the Byzantine rule, the expectation of a personal Messiah acquired increasing prominence and became the center of a number of eschatological concepts. These messiahs were not thought of as saviors in later Christian thought, but as ideal leaders who would preside over a divinely willed and messianic socio-religious order. The son of David messianism, with its political implications, was overshadowed by apocalyptic notions of a more mystical and mythological character. Thus, it was believed that a heavenly being called the Son of Man would descend to earth to save his people. The messianic ferment of the period was attested by contemporary Jewish Hellenistic literature, including the appearance of prophets such as John the Baptist and Jesus. This ferment came to a climax in the first Jewish revolt against Rome in around 70 CE, when various currents of anti-imperial millennial ideology culminated in a major uprising against the Roman occupation of Judah and Galilee. After the failure of the Second Jewish Revolt around 135 CE and the execution of several rabbis who supported it, the anti-apocalyptic approach gained the other hand, and there's no mention of a millennial kingdom in the Mishnah that was written about 200 CE, the first major textual production of this normative Jewish tradition. Popular apocalyptic literature, however, continued, and in this tradition, the warrior Messiah gained prominence. The belief spread that a Messiah from the house of Joseph would precede the triumphant Messiah from the house of David. Developed toward the end of the 2nd century, this conception is connected with the more basic notion of an apocalyptic messianism, the belief that the messianic advent is preceded by suffering and catastrophe. In some versions of this apocalyptic messianism, the new heaven and new earth are ushered amid destruction and catastrophe. And so then the modernist movements in Judaism maintain the traditional faith in an ultimately unredeemed world and a messianic future for humankind without insisting on a personal Messiah. Undoubtedly, Judaism owns its survival to a considerable extent to its steadfast faith in the messianic promise. In spite of its spiritual and mystical connotations, Jewish messianism never relinquished its understanding of the messianic order in historical, social, and political terms. Hence, many consider the participation of the Jewish faith in terms of the historical messianic history and the eschatology that came from the Jewish tradition. And now we will sing hymn number 174, O Earth, You Are Surpassing Fair.
Thank you.
So Reverend Nathan, UU minister of Baton Rouge, came to preach to us on Mardi Gras Sunday. And at that time, and on that Sunday, he invited us to think of what a UU New Orleans version of eschatology might look like. One that included hope and celebration. And a couple of you asked me about this next theological term called eschatology from a UU perspective. And I've been thinking about it for a few months because if you know the history of eschatology and theology, it's an interesting mixture that's not often talked about. As we continue to cycle through the change of this life and this congregation, I wanted to extrapolate a little bit more of what Reverend Nathan Ryan invited us to do a few months ago, to ponder what a Unitarian Universalist New Orleans eschatology might look like. For those unfamiliar with the term eschatology in traditional Christian contexts refers to the theology of the end of times. Yet in a multi-faith context, the subtleties of the study of the end of times can vary in interesting ways even within Christianity. I will cover some traditional Western faith views of eschatology as our reading began to help us with from a historical perspective of the Jewish people, and also give us examples of how we can look into endings or end of times, including a Unitarian Universalist approach to it. End times, or the end of the world as we know it, or what is last, comes from the Greek word eschatos, endings. So eschatology literally means the study of endings. If we believe this ending of time is literally imminent, as some do, we might extend this idea of some of what we hear about in the media and other places on apocalyptic eschatology. Is it prophesized to be in the future, whatever these eschatology views might look like, or is it unfolding in just tinier, smaller amounts? Because a Buddhist might say, in the view that everything is impermanent and always changing, that smaller increments of change are always unfolding. In a more traditional fundamental Christian perspective, the more like grosser, larger levels of deconstruction occurring in this world that occur in our lives, and hence also the promise of what regeneration might look like, whether through the love of Jesus, or we can also look at what comes after death regardless of one's view of heaven. The promise of the return of Jesus brings joy in some Christian eschatological views. Comings and goings, beginnings and ends, as we know them to be, exist in our daily lives, our yearly lives, or our entire mortal lives. Our existence of life is how we perceive it here on earth with our precious lives. And the fall equinox is one way to measure time, when light decreases and we have longer nights. The time to reap our harvests of pumpkins, squash, and rice, more ancient ways that we have measured time, a more intimate connection to the land and the cyclical nature of time, with beginnings, endings, and regeneration. Sometimes we go towards the light amidst dark times, but sometimes that cozy darkness invites us inwards for reflection and to retreat. And today, as mentioned, is Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar that is connected with the 10 days that follow Rosh Hashanah. The Jewish faith that has the year beginning with the end of harvest season, with the winter season and colder months, inviting us inward in the northern hemisphere as we go further inside for reflection in the new year of what the winter invites us to reflect on. The Jewish people and their faith were continually being persecuted by the Romans. Life was fearful with uncertainty day to day. Jesus came at a time when a prophet was needed amidst uncertainty and all the wars that occurred. Hope was needed, the promise that the suffering they were experiencing wasn't an end-all. So, that it wasn't an end-all. So in the time of Jesus, the life that was known at that time was ending, and as imperialism solidified, and rabbis continually were being crucified at crosses, and the towers literally falling, as our earlier readings were pointing to. And so I sometimes wonder if we can't see similarities in our secular life right now. We see our planet and worldwide communities suffering at such painful levels. It sometimes begs us to say, is this it? Is this the full trajectory of our human lives? And yet, here in New Orleans, amidst suffering, joy can be seen and felt at so many levels. Mardi Gras is literally the end of a year for us in New Orleans, going back to how the Roman culture began and ended a year, with Ash Wednesday and Lent beginning the new church year before pagan and Roman cultures merged certain ceremonies, with the Gregorian calendar aligning itself closer to winter solstice time, a time in Western society where it is culturally popular to reflect on beginning and endings within this time. So we do it at the calendar Gregorian year, and we do it at Lent. Even in physics, we have the end of planetary systems, black holes, and maybe a more expansive view than some traditional religions might have. Endings or fear of endings can be traumatic, with hopes of new beginnings. Endings bringing unknowns, and sometimes those unknowns bring anxieties. And yet there is this ever-evolving unfolding of our lives, unfolding of our families, as well as our communities, our world, and our universe. Life is continually changing at each moment, even if we aren't consciously aware of it at each moment. Buddhist teacher Dildo Khyentse Rinpoche says, like a robe wears out over time and turns to rags, life wears out day to day, from second to second. So we can ponder in many ways, where do these forms of our lives begin and where do they end? And as a kid, I wondered in my own way. There's an image in our order of service of the evolution of a life of a dandelion. And I love dandelions, and I would pick them up in little tiny bouquets and give them to my mother. And for the dandelions that weren't at their end of the life, I would keep them in my hand. At the end of a dandelion life, as you might know, they're known as puffballs. The yellow petals are gone, and there's just this like little white puffball that's there. And the tradition is to let go in a wish for new things to emerge in future moments. Not a doom and gloom, but a hopeful outlook that new seeds spread and grow. Now, for you gardeners out there, you might see dandelions as weeds, and a fear of dandelions spreading might not bring the most calming thoughts. When I lived in Nova Scotia, in the spring, there were just endless fields of dandelions in the fields everywhere. And I learned that locals made dandelion wine, and I was like, who knew that was a thing? I didn't know. So there's always these places in life where we're transforming, and we see our earth transforming in these magical moments. And we let go, and we wish and hope to transcend to a more peaceful and fulfilling life. There are Buddhist teachings that state in letting go of expectations is a good thing, which invite doorways in allowing for relaxation. And relaxation invites new forms of wisdom to arise. And we can relax into our anxieties. It's kind of this paradoxical feeling or experience. Because can we really relax into our anxieties and let everything be without trying to change the outcomes of our life? Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield states, we are awakened to the profound realization that the true path to liberation is to let go of just everything. We don't want suffering in the world. We don't like the change that it brings sometimes in the world. And sometimes we find it can't come soon enough. And we become anxious because we need change from our stagnant or painful lives. And so letting go isn't always easy. So we, in our anxiety, waiting for the world to change and hoping change comes sometimes quick, we might try to avoid the reality of just what exists right now in this moment. And they're brilliant moments, they are dull moments, they are anxious moments. If we just relax into each moment and embrace our anxieties, embrace our joys in each moment, we have an opportunity to proactively engage more vividly in our lives in each moment, as well as with one of the greatest anxieties for some, the end of this mortal life. The paradox that we lean into fear, although not harmful ones, and modern psychology says that the fear has less of a grasp on you and it might even dissipate over time. If we engage with a love of life in each other and in each moment that is possible, then that trajectory of love is always in this life at every moment. It just is. And the mystery that lies on the other side will have the momentum of that love, whatever lies on that other side. We are at the ends and beginnings of every moment of this life. We engage in nanoseconds that accumulate into seconds that accumulate into minutes, into years, into decades. We are literally always changing with our outer circumstances influencing our lives. And we are part of an evolutionary process that is bigger than ourselves and bigger than our individual communities. And there's the end of this life, the end of loved ones, the end of the life of a beloved pet. There are endings in divorces. There are endings in moves and having to sell homes. There's loss of ends of friendships. There are special hugs of friends and family that we experienced last year or even last week that are gone. Maybe with new opportunities for hugs in the future. Maybe those moments are gone in those exchanges of compassionate moments, but they are always propelling us into our new moments ahead, new connections, new sufferings, where love and compassion can remain in our hearts and in our spirits. Without hope, without love, without compassion, without connection, moments of tomorrow become more challenging. So a Unitarian Universalist New Orleans eschatology, a Mardi Gras spirit, love of good food and sharing it with neighbors, magical music, coming together of so many cultures as we read each Sunday the term Balbancha, the native word of many tongues, as this part of the world has been a place where people have traded and connected for millennia, celebrating a multicultural and multi-faith world. In our new proposed Unitarian Universalist bylaws and statement of faith, love is at the center of absolutely everything we do. Love is needed in each moment of life, but that love takes on different forms, different intensities, different unfoldings. They are evolutions of love. And eschatologies, you could say, of love that flow, that are never stagnant, with the heart-opening movement that love always invites us into. Beginnings and endings of an evolution of love. So love can be our constant in our UU eschatology. the eschatology of love, constantly ending in love, constantly beginning in love, constantly continuing in love. Eschatology of justice, of equality, of compassion. These are Unitarian Universalist values and principles. It doesn't mean the end of justice. It is the promise of what is still yet to come with what our hope, compassion, and love brings in this world. And it's always unfolding, never finite. It's a view that we all belong to this earth and must care for the air, the water, all creatures, the plants that provide us food, the love that we give to each other in each evolving moment in time. We do it with the promise of joy and coming together with our interconnected existence, and that we are bounded in this existence by relative time. And in the Unitarian Universalist tradition of our principles, we bring our love and compassion and the belief of liberty and justice for all in our interconnected world that is ongoing and ever evolving, always taking on new forms. However we individually choose to measure time, manifesting love, manifesting joy, and manifesting compassion, to bring about a more fair and equitable world in each moment that we breathe here on earth is a Unitarian, Universalist, New Orleans eschatology. May it be so, and amen. And I now have a reading I wanted to share. It's called A Love Letter to New Orleans, and it's by writer and activist Lynn Brown. No matter how much I travel, after spending nearly 10 years in New Orleans, both pre- and post-Katrina, I still haven't found anywhere that feels as much like home. It's hard not to feel nostalgic for New Orleans, even if you haven't spent most of your adult life there. The city lends itself to dreaming about the past, from its ancient architecture to its deep reverence for culture and history, particularly its own, which is varied and fascinating. New Orleans also cemented itself in the collective imagination through every possible form of media, from classic old movies like The Big Easy to modern shows such as The American Horror Story. And of course, there's the music. The city is synonymous with the birth of jazz, which is largely credited with having started right here, and then continued on with a unique sound that could only have come about in this city, such as bounce musician Big Freedia and the brass pop of trombone shorty. Everyone knows that that's what makes the city so special, is that its culture. Every book, movie, or tourism campaign you read will mention the unique blend of people that came together here to make what it is. What they don't often mention is that this cultural gumbo is a living tradition, not just one put on for tourists. Sure, you can go down to the quarter on occasion and take pictures of someone dressed in Mardi Gras regalia, but it's a totally different experience to stumbling across a tribe as it passes through your neighborhood on St. Joseph's Day. It's not for tourists or for show, but just because that's what they've done for generations. Because keeping that tradition, and really all the city's traditions, alive is as important as it is difficult. The thing is, while New Orleans is always a great city to visit, she's not always a very easy city to live with. Despite the nonstop party that's often portrayed on screen, the reality is that it can be hard to make a life here. Rising costs and rising sea levels often fall particularly hard on the people whose families have lived here for generations, the cultural bearers who carry on the traditions that make New Orleans a place where just everyone wants to be. That's the thing about love. Whether it's a person or place, real love looks below the surface to the heart of things. And the heart of New Orleans is its people. It's the people who cook the delicious etouffee and the crawfish pies and other delicacies that you just can't find anywhere else, who make the music that changed history and continue to carry on the traditions that make this city so special. More than anything, the thing I miss the most, the thing I love the most about New Orleans is its people. New Orleanians have a way of making the mundane fun and turning tragedy into a low-key party. The joy permeates the city. The feeling that draws visitors from around the world is often a defiant joy. A commitment to living life to its fullest in the face of hardship, especially in the face of hardship. When it comes to love, reciprocity is key. For those of us who love this city, whether born and raised here or just passing through, we need to do a better job of sharing some responsibility for her care. We need to think more carefully about where we stay and eat so that we can be sure we're benefiting the local economy as much as possible rather than contributing to the conditions that make it hard to live here. We need to do better supporting people and policies that preserve the city's culture, not just for tourists, but for the cultural bearers who work so hard to hold on to these traditions in the first place. So the next time you go to New Orleans, by all means, follow her lead, dance in the street, listen to her stories, maybe drink a little more than you ought to. We all could use a dose of the city's defiant joy in our lives. Just be sure to take a moment to leave her better than when you depart. Be better to take a moment to leave her than you found her when you depart. I hope that I have done that in my service, and I know that you will continue on in that tradition in a Unitarian Universalist spirit of always making this city and this world a better place.
Amen.
And now we will sing and the saints go marching in. Sunday mornings. So my closing words for you are from Mystic Krishnamurti. He says, if you begin to understand what you are without trying to change it, then what you are undergoes a transformation. My wish for you is that you are always unfolding with love and transformation. May it be so. Amen. And now we can gather in the fellowship hall for food and company.